Well, let me thank everybody for coming today. I have a few comments before we take your questions, if I might. An audit report released today by the Division of Legislative Audit confirms what we have been saying for the last year regarding the Division of Advancement deficit, and that is that there was no fraud, there was no malfeasance, no theft, or misappropriation of public or private funds. There is some disagreement on technical accounting principles, as you will find in the audit, which we recognized and then subsequently made adjustments. The audit clearly shows this was a case of overspending by employees of the university who failed to maintain proper budgetary oversight. Briefly stated, they were borrowing on anticipated revenues to pay current bills. All expenditures, however, were for legitimate university needs in preparation for a major capital campaign, and every penny has been accounted for. The conclusion of the two-part audit report, which includes sections by the Division of Legislative Audit and the University of Arkansas Internal Audit Department, gives us a complete accounting of the issues that led to the advancement deficit. I want to take this opportunity to thank the legislative auditors as well as the UA system auditors for their efforts in helping us to resolve this issue and bring it to closure. We are in essential agreement with the auditors in regards to the cause of the deficit and the corrective steps needed to prevent it from happening again, some of which we have already undertaken. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. We have with us Gene Shook, our treasurer, Don Peterson, our chief financial officer, our provost, and Chris Wyrick, our vice chancellor for advancement. Be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
What's the next step with this audit now? What are you going to present to the legislature, Chancellor, based on this?
I'll just really be going to the legislative committee meeting on Friday and answering whatever questions they might have. They have the audit, and we'll be down there to entertain any questions they may have. There will also be an audit committee of the Board of Trustees that has been scheduled for Saturday morning, I believe at 8 o'clock, and we'll be answering any questions that the audit committee of the board may have.
Why was the figure higher than originally anticipated? It's over $4 million now.
I don't think it was higher. If you look at the memorandum that Gene Shook, our treasurer, prepared, which is part of the audit, it will state the same amount. Gene, do you want to comment on that?
I would just say that the audit validated that the deficit was in the range that we originally estimated when we prepared the report. As we have said, that it was a continuing review, and there were some refinements to that number as was reported in the memorandum as more information became available to us. But it is within the, essentially the same range.
Max Brantley here, if I'm not stepping on anybody else, since I can't see. I do have a question about the amount of growth expenses, $5 million growth cited in the audit, how that was overlooked by so many people.
Max, can you refer us to where you're looking in the audit?
Yeah, let me find this thing, where it talked about expenditures increased from $7.94 million to $13.23 million without permanent funding for those positions. They've made some references to personnel growth being the primary cause of the increase in expenditures in the division.
What page is that on, Max?
I don't know. These are just my notes from it.
It's the fourth one in the highlight in the report.
Perhaps on page 10, advancement expenditure is increased from $7.94 million to $13.23 million.
Yeah.
or 67% over the 4-year period. Well, I think that was primarily the problem, that they were increasing expenses thinking their revenue would be higher, and it wasn't. Don't know that there's any other explanation, Max, than that they were hiring people primarily is where the issue, I think, was, and didn't have the revenue coming in to pay for it.
Yes, sir. How is it they weren't aware of that? They wouldn't have known how much revenue was coming in?
Well, that's a good question. I think part of it has to do with the complication of how they're funded. They get funding from multiple sources. Part of it comes from university revenue. Part of it comes from private gift support. Part of it comes from the float on dollars that come into the foundation before they're expended, and they get that revenue. And part of it comes from basis points off of the endowment. So all of that together makes a complicating picture of trying to develop a budget. I can't really tell you why they didn't know. They should have known.
But
I
the
was
university defended the hiring as all being properly budgeted within position by position within the authorizing legislation. I can't cite you the spot, but I think that appears somewhere in your appendix response.
all I can say is that for the 10 years that I was in that position, we had dramatic increases in our budget coming from the foundation, and we balanced it every year. We monitored it very closely. We did not leave it up to one person, Joy Sharp in this case. We had multiple people that were watching it. So we went through that before in a campaign where we had dramatic increases, but we were monitoring the amount of revenue before we would hire people. Basically, I think what happened here and what the audit is confirming is that they were not monitoring that. There were times, I will say to you, where I asked our former Vice Chancellor, Brad Choate, if he was asking for any more revenue from the university in his budget asks, and he would say to me, "We've got it covered, we're okay." So bottom line is they weren't okay. They were spending more than they had. And it accumulated over a 4-year time frame.
In your opening remarks, you made a statement, if I recall correctly, that they were spending money based on anticipated revenue, and they never really spent any more than what came in. I thought there was a point in the audit in which the audit said they couldn't get more money from the foundation precisely because the foundation had already met its budget limits for the year.
No, I don't think I said that, Max. What I said was they thought there was more revenue that was coming in. I think what we have said is that they were not monitoring the budget adequately from the various sources that they had, and were hiring people not realizing that they had the revenue. So they weren't watching the bottom line in terms of the revenue that they had coming in.
What about the allegation the treasurer made material misrepresentation about sources of money?
Well, I think that there's a dispute on that. We have clearly indicated that in the answer that we gave to the audit. I'll turn that over to our treasurer, Jean Shook, who is here, to make any other comments about that she would like to make.
I would just say that we recorded an account receivable as we believe we were required to under governmental accounting standards. We consulted the authoritative literature. That was our interpretation that under an accrual basis of reporting, we were required to report and record that receivable, which we did. We believed that eligibility requirements were met to record that receivable, and we believe that it is indeed collectible.
But how if we're talking about foundation money, it wasn't there.
We believe that it is collectible because there is spending policies set at the foundation that require regular distributions of funds. So therefore, funds are available.
I think it's probably important, too, to note, Max, and I can let Jean speak to this much better than me as a CPA, she is a CPA, not me, that we had done this for a number of years in the past. So, you know, that's how we had accounted for it in the past. You want to speak to that, Jean?
This is a standard, regular, certainly nothing unusual accrual adjusting entry that is made at the end of every reporting period. We are required from financial reporting standards to report on an accrual basis. That means that we must record revenues and expenses that are earned and incurred in the reporting period. That's what these accrual adjustments are designed to do. There was nothing unusual about this particular entry. In fact, we have made other accrual entries very similar regularly, not only in this reporting period, but in previous reporting periods, and will continue to do so in the future. These are all audited by our external financial auditors, for which we have received unqualified opinions, and there was no concerns raised.
What about the loans that weren't reported?
The loans were internal arrangements wholly contained within the foundation. On two of the loans that were not reported in our financial report, the reason is that there were no transactions that occurred in the university accounting system that would be reportable. There were no transactions. There's nothing to report on the university's financial report in regard to those loans.
Was one of those to make a deferred compensation payment for an administrator?
No.
Chancellor, is this a black eye for the university, and does the buck stop not with those who were fired, but with the people at this table?
I don't think it's a black eye for the university at all. I think that we have a solid fiscal position, the best position we've been in the history of the university. When I became chancellor a little over 5 years ago, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million in reserves. We started this fiscal year with $50 million in reserves. We have increased our number of students here by over 6,000 students in that time. We've put into our physical plant something like $450 million. We've kept our tuition and fees low for our students compared to our counterparts. We've made great progress in the last 5 years. And on top of all that, our alumni have given us their confidence in supporting the university as generously as they ever have in the past, with $108 million this past year. So no, I don't think it is a black eye. It is not acceptable. We had 2 employees that were not watching their budget, but they didn't steal anything. They didn't misappropriate any money. There isn't a single penny, 1 nickel of public or private money that was misspent. It was, as the auditors have told us, and as we said a year ago, a case of overspending. So I think the people of Arkansas can rest assured that their funds were not misappropriated. They were not spent illegally. There was no private inurement. That's what the auditors have found, and I think that in itself is important to celebrate. Now, is it acceptable to overspend your budget? No. And 2 employees lost their jobs over it, and it's unfortunate, but that's what happened. So no, I wouldn't say that it's a black eye at all. I think that what's happening at the University of Arkansas with our students, with new faculty coming in, with the facilities that we're renovating, it's a great time to be at the University of Arkansas.
Mr. Chancellor, Jack Anchorage here. Would you say that the problem has been fixed, or you're in the process of doing that?
Yes, I think the best way to put it, we have fixed the problem, we believe, and we are in the process. I'd answer that yes to both questions. There are certain things that we will be doing as we move forward. We've outlined that in the audit in our response. I think there were some excellent suggestions by the auditors, and we plan to implement those. We had already done a number of things before the audit came out, including, of course, dismissing the 2 employees that were the cause of the problem, but also hiring a new financial officer in that division that now reports to the CFO, and putting a clear budget together that each of the officers in the advancement unit now know that they have a budget. They were operating without a budget previously since 2008. When I left the position, there was never a budget that was given to several of the people in the division to operate with. That has been changed. So I think we've made a number of changes, and we will continue to implement other changes as we move forward. One of the major changes is to hire somebody that can help monitor all this. The person will have a dual reporting relationship to the provost and to the CFO, and will work very closely with the administrative and academic units to monitor their budgets. I think that's a huge step in the right direction.
And you believe this will satisfy the legislative audit?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we certainly are going to go down to the audit, to the committee meeting on Friday and take any questions that they have about any matter. We believe that the report is a good report. There are a couple things in there that we disagreed with, and we stated that, but that's the nature of audits. And we will go down to the Legislative Council, and I feel very comfortable about being able to say to members of the General Assembly that the state of Arkansas lost no money. There wasn't a penny that was lost in any of this. It's what we've been saying for over a year. We've had about 100 FOI requests for information about this, which we've responded to. We've had thousands of documents that we have released. We've spent I don't know how many hours, and it really boils down to the fact that what we said a year ago is what the audit says, that it was a case of overspending. I think it's very important to send the signal out to our constituents, which we plan to do, and I hope the media will as well, that there was no overspending. I mean, excuse me, there was no wrong spending, there was no fraud, there was no misspending. It was all a case of overspending. And I might add, for projects and programs that we need as we move into a major capital campaign. Last year, I will restate again, we raised over $108 million, and it does take resources to do that. We're looking at moving into a capital campaign that may, in fact, hopefully raise over $1 billion, and you have to have resources to do that.
Chancellor, on page 2 in the audit, it says that the DLA had difficulty obtaining financial records. Were any of those lost or destroyed for some reason? And it also mentions Joy Sharp's computer was given to another employee and not backed up. Shouldn't that information have been kept somewhere?
Bill, I can answer that and let Dr. Peterson answer, but the bottom line was that she didn't have a lot of records. I don't know if she didn't have them when she was working there. There is, I think, some evidence that suggests she was not keeping good records, but there were very little records available for us to inspect. She also claimed that she had very little information on her computer. As far as the backup, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm not aware of that as an issue.
Her computer was backed up to a server on campus, and when we went looking for information to try to understand what had happened, we didn't find any of the information useful. And that really is the case for both the materials in her office and on the computer.
So you did see what was on it?
Well, I didn't personally see it, but my staff did, yes. And the internal audit staff was pointed in the direction of the server so they could have looked at it. I don't know what they did or didn't do, and I don't know what they communicated to legislative audit about it. I don't know if Gene knows any more than that.
I don't.
Other questions?
You mentioned that the Advancement Division has balanced its budget for the fiscal year '23 with a combination of things, including cost containment. I'm wondering what some of those cost containment moves were.
A majority of that amount had to do with our marketing for this campaign. We had a hefty number in the marketing to advance the campaign, and we cut that out. Other things were just day-to-day expenditures. We had something as simplistic as a courier service that we were paying $15,000 a year for. We found by using FedEx, we could cut that to $2,000. We've looked at every single expenditure, even the coffee that we drink, and broken it down to what was necessary and what was not necessary. But a majority of it was marketing money for the campaign.
I think that amounted to about $700,000.
That is
something
correct.
like that. So it was a big chunk.
700,000 in marketing or total?
Total in marketing. Just in marketing, we had about $700,000 in there, in the budget.
Marketing, what sort of marketing?
You know, a great example I can give you is the piece that runs during the football games at halftime if you're watching ESPN. Last couple of years, we've had external bodies, a group in Dallas, a marketing firm, produce that piece for us. We were able to do it in-house this year for about $32,000. It's just a matter of what we can be proactive in the department and turn out ourselves as opposed to looking externally.
We had purchased advertisements in one of our big markets, Dallas. We had billboards, we had buses, transportation buses with our logo. That's another example. There are others, but
That's been eliminated too. I asked to entice students to come here,
yes,
and that's been eliminated in the Dallas market.
it has been. Yes, sir.
Mr. Gerhard, as I understand your comments earlier, it sounds like you feel a bit vindicated that the audit says what you said a year ago. Why were you initially kind of hesitant to warm up to the idea of sending this to an audit?
I wasn't hesitant. Didn't feel that it was necessary in the initial stages of our review. We felt that we knew what had happened. We felt that we had a very good handle on what had happened. Frankly, we kept getting FOI requests and kept getting inundated, maybe is the best word, that we made the decision, look, if there's that much speculation that we're not giving the real picture, then let's let the auditors take a look at it. I never had any question at all about what we said was what happened. I think the auditors have confirmed that. I thought that our treasurer, Gene Shook, did a very good, thorough job of reviewing it. And I was confident that there was no fraud, there was no misspent money. And that's one of the reasons, frankly, that we based our decision on allowing the 2 employees to remain in their positions until their appointments ran out. Not remain in their positions, that's not being stated right. We did remove them from their positions and put them in a different area outside of the administrative area of their responsibility previously. Our feeling was that they didn't misspend any money, they didn't steal any money, there was no fraud. And I had to make a decision what's fair for those employees, and that was a decision I made. Whether or not that was the right decision, I think may be debatable with some people. I still think it was, and it's it's a decision that I stand by. Do I feel vindicated? I'm not going to sit here and say that. No, I mean I don't think it's a time to puff our chests at all. It was an unfortunate occurrence that that cost 2 people their jobs, one whom has not been able to find a job since then, and it's a tragic occurrence, but I think we all need to be understanding of what has happened here, and that is that they overspent their budget, and we said that from day one. We invited the legislative auditors, we invited the university auditors to take a look at it. I think they have made some good suggestions for us, which we want to follow. But I'm not sure they've told us a whole lot more than we already knew. They've confirmed what we knew. There are some suggestions in there that we appreciate, and we very much appreciate it. I think they did a very professional job. They did a good job, and we appreciate what they did to help confirm what the issue was.
What suggestions do you anticipate you seeing if they follow some of the suggestions? Which ones?
I'll turn to my colleagues.
Well, we're going to set up a system to monitor budgets much more closely, probably on a monthly basis. The provost has already introduced that to the academic areas, and they're reporting monthly. What we're trying to put together is a report with the right kind of information, so each unit's not having to generate that information themselves, and then let them have the information and use that as a tool to do a better job of managing. Not that they were doing anything wrong, but give them better tools to do an even better job in managing their budgets going forward. And I'm talking about people outside of advancement everywhere on the campus.
Are there systems in place so that you guys higher up know what's going on more closely, so that it's not the fault of someone below the people at this table? I mean, in other words, are you guys going to be more closely monitoring personally these types of issues, budgetary issues?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, I think we'll be looking at the broader picture, and other people are going to be looking at more detailed pictures. I don't know that I personally will be looking at every expenditure on campus. That would be pretty much impossible. But I'll be looking at more than we did in the past.
Chancellor, what part of this audit bothers you the most?
I guess I wouldn't say that any of it bothers me. I welcome it. I ask for it. I embrace it. There's not anything in here that causes me pain or anguish. What I hope, Bill, is that that the members of the media will read it very closely and will report, as they generally do, the accuracy of the report, which is that what we've already stated, that they've confirmed what we've said all along. There are some things in here that we may disagree with, and we have stated that openly, but I don't think that's unusual for an audit. That happens regularly. So there's not anything in here that really gives me pain. The only thing that gives me pain in all of this is that it's unfortunate that this happened, and it happened on my watch. I think it happened because of two employees that weren't watching the bottom line. One of them I had worked with very closely as my budget person, and I can tell you that everything that that person did, we monitored very closely. At that time, I had Sandy and Clay Edwards as my development people, and they worked with Joy Sharp very closely. It didn't appear that that happened under Mr. Choate's tenure. And I've watched it very closely and watched our budgets like a hawk. And the evidence shows in this report that that did not take place, and that Mr. Choate was not reviewing it and was not watching it. And I regret that that cost him his job, but you know, I think it was appropriate that it did. And it certainly was appropriate that it cost Joy Sharp her job. So we don't like what happened, but I think, again, it's very, very important, particularly for the people in this room and on the phone, to realize that there wasn't any state money or any private money that was lost or misappropriated. And that has been confirmed by both of the audits. It's very rare to have two different auditors doing an audit, but I asked for them so we would have an independent auditor, legislative auditor, and we would have a audit by the system to be certain that we covered every base. And they spent hours and hours and hours and went through thousands of documents. And their conclusion is here in front of you. And I think it points to the fact that what we said is what happened.
Chancellor, this is Wayne Morris. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question for you and for Ms. Shook. And this is not the first time I've wished I was an accountant, but the disagreement that the UA has with legislative audit over these year-end receivables, which they said partially obscured the deficits, and that they said was a typical practice to eliminate deficits. If I understood Dean Shook earlier, this has been, she believes that the university has been following, generally accepted accounting procedures for governmental bodies in doing that. Is there not any concern at all that what the legislative audit has questioned here could be a problem elsewhere in the university's accounts? Not just in the division of the advancement division where legislative audit concluded that it was a problem and you disagree, but if this is happening elsewhere in the university's accounts, could it not be a problem there?
Gwen, this is Don Peterson. The most of the campus does not have the unusual situation of the complexity of the resources that advancement had. We probably the closest other unit that to advancement would be Walton College, and we have reviewed what they do, and they're doing a very good job in looking at all of their resources and managing them to a budget. So I think part of what we plan to put in place is a closer look at everybody, but the risk is not at the same level for other units as it was for advancement, because of the magnitude of the foundation's support relative to their total budget.
Can I ask another question on this issue? Are you basically saying that the pattern is that whatever the advancement division spent, everybody knew the foundation would cover? And if that's the case, is that going to be the procedure going forward?
No, I don't think that's what we're saying at all.
Well, you said, whatever we spent, we call it a loan, call it accrual, call it whatever you wanted. The money was going to be there to pay it off, however much it was.
No, I don't think that's what we're saying, Max. We actually had a budget, a spreadsheet, which I believe we sent to you, disclosed to you some months ago, which showed that in 2008 and prior to that, we had a very good accounting of where the resources were coming from and what our budget needed to be as we move forward. We estimated what we would get from the foundation. We estimated what we would get from private gifts. We knew what would come from the university. The other two somewhat floated up and down as the market did. But we had a very good picture of where our revenue would be coming, and we had a budget. That all stopped in 2008. Why it stopped, all I can say to you is that they weren't monitoring it. They should have been monitoring it. They certainly had the spreadsheet that we used in the 10 years I was in that position, where we didn't ever have a deficit. So, absolutely we're not going to allow advancement to spend anything they want. We do have a budget now. Mr. Wyrick has put that together along with Denise Reynolds, who is his budget executive reporting to our CFO. And we have a solid budget that we will adhere to going forward. The point is...
There's a missing player here, and that's the foundation, unfortunately.
Say,
They knew, presumably, that they were being asked to send over more than was budgeted.
well, they actually shut down the amount that they were sending when the university, the advancement division, requested more than was there. So
did they say anything to you about that?
they didn't say anything to me until it was done, until they shut it down.
But they did at that point.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we couldn't pay our bills from foundation revenue because the revenue wasn't there. So yes, they shut the division down. That happened in when? July. Other questions from anybody?
So
like,
make sure I understood, like you're saying foundation revenue stopped coming at some point in July. How much was that stopped coming from the foundation?
Well, we usually got about $4 million a year from the foundation. I'd have to look at, I don't have the precise numbers in front of me, but I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million. Denise, do you have off the top of your head that figure?
It was
Somewhere around that.
Around 4 million divided into quarterly payments of around $1 million.
Did that vary from year to year depending on investments?
It
Yes.
does, but it's on a rolling 36-month average, so it gets smooth a lot more than the market you might see. And so it's not unpredictable. Now, if the market tanks, I mean, you're going to have to predict that it's going to go down, but it won't go down the same way, at the same rate that the market went down.
Was it more in 2008 than 4 million?
It had, I don't remember 2008, it had been higher in some years and lower in some years.
So there's a $4 million hole in budget from the foundation that's being covered by some of these cuts. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
No, it's part of their base budget now.
I have a question. You said that the budget stopped in 2008. Do you think it was like a failure of passing along the torch appropriately, that they didn't continue to follow the practices that you'd had in place?
No, actually, I can confirm to you conversations that I had with Mr. Choate, with our CFO present, where I told him that he was going to have to figure out ways to enhance his budget, which primarily had to do with increasing the endowment over that period of time, and he may have to come in and ask for more revenue. We had conversations with him. He had access to the information that I had when I was in that job. He had the spreadsheets, but the record will show, and this has been released to the media, that those spreadsheets stopped in 2008. They did not continue. And for whatever reason, he chose not to continue them. It was our Bible that we lived by. It had every cost in the budget, every area that we were spending money on. It had every revenue source, and it was outlined for several years in advance. So why they didn't keep it up, I don't know. You'll have to ask Mr. Choate or Ms. Sharp the reasons for that. She indicated, I do believe, to, and I don't know if it's in here, to the auditors that she just didn't keep it up, and she should have. I believe that's in the audit report.
Chancellor, when you say no public or private money was lost, you have extra employees though, right, that were hired with that money. So money's paying for them to work. How is nothing being lost there? Are they bringing in more money in the long run?
Oh, absolutely. These are people that were hired to get ready for a major campaign. There's no lost money there. They were hired under our plan to continue to try to raise more money. So I think you would find comparing, I know you will find comparing our development staff size with institutions that are raising as much as we are, you're going to find that we are very lean in our numbers, extremely lean. So, you know, they were all positions that were necessary as we move forward with planning for a campaign. So there wasn't any lost revenue. There wasn't any lost funding on either side of the equation. They were all for purposes that were legitimate and necessary, and I think the audit confirms that.
But that many people wouldn't have been hired if the budget had been more carefully monitored, right?
Well, I think that's probably accurate. They shouldn't have been hired until we had the resources and a clear plan to how we were going to get the resources. There are various ways that we could have done this, and we had laid those ways out, frankly. One way was that we might have tried to get more basis points from the foundation. We only get about 42 or 3 basis points for the foundation. Most institutions get 100 basis points, 100 basis points being 1%. We get less than a half, and I'm not complaining. I mean, you know, that's what the foundation board believes is the right amount. That gives more funding for the academic purposes at the university. So, you know, there are some good things that come out of less basis points for operations. But a lot of places in the country fund their advancement operations totally from private gift support. We don't do that. We have some university support, we have some private support. If we were to shift all of that, and we've discussed it, we would have to get at least 100 basis points. And I suspect that wouldn't be easy to do. That's all decided by the foundation board. So, you know, I hope that answers your question, Bill. Others? We'll stay here as long as you want.
Is it fair to?
I'm checking out. Thanks, guys.
Okay, Max.
Is it fair to, because I understand what you're saying, that in '08, everything was going great, and then as soon as Mr. Shope took over, the wheels came off, and that sent us down this spiral. And that there are certainly people who want to attach some of that to you as the head guy at the university. Will you respond to those concerns that you know, as soon as you brought a guy in to take over this division that you ran, and the wheels come off, then
Yeah, I'll respond.
and it goes on for a few years.
I'd be happy to respond to that. You know, keep in mind that during the years that Mr. Choate was Vice Chancellor, we had record-breaking private philanthropy years. A couple of those years, we raised well over $100 million. I suspect, and I can't put words in his mouth and shouldn't, but he's probably thinking, wait a minute, we had a $3 to $4 million deficit, but we raised over $100 million. That's not a bad return on investment. My response to that would be that is a bad return when you don't plan it, when you don't have planning, and you don't have revenue to pay for that has to come from someplace else. Most of the gifts that we receive, frankly, are restricted gifts, so they have to go into a particular area within the university. We can't use them except for a small number to augment his budget. So I'm not going to totally throw Mr. Choate under the bus because we raised a lot of money. He was a talented fundraiser. There's no question about that. He worked several top universities. He had a very powerful resume, a very powerful background in fundraising, and he raised some money. Did he have an understanding of finances? You know, the report will show you that he didn't even file his expenses, that he had $7,200 in expenses outstanding when he left the university that we had to pay him. So I guess I would answer that by saying pretty darn good fundraiser, and we appreciate what he did while he was a fundraiser. Not so good managing the budget, terrible managing the budget. Now, you know, do I take responsibility for that? I hired him. I brought him here. I felt that I needed to look for somebody that had very high sterling credentials. He did have that. We had an open search. We interviewed a lot of people. We had a committee. He was by and far the best of any of the people that we interviewed. And the search committee at the time voted him #1. In fact, said, if you can't get him, we want to start the search over. So I did know him. I did have a background. I had not worked with him for many, many years, something like 15 years. But I did have a background and knew him and knew of him and had worked with him. And so I thought, you know, we were going to bring in somebody that could really do a great job. I think he did an admirable job in fundraising, and I have to give him credit for that. He didn't do a very admirable job in managing, and that was the problem. And I think it's unfortunate for him. It's unfortunate for us.
Will this lead to you, when you bring someone new in who doesn't have a track record with the University of Arkansas, will this lead to you personally taking a closer look at first 2 or 3 years of that?
Well, I've already made my decision on who should be the person, and that's Mr. Wyrick sitting here. He's our new Vice Chancellor for advancement. I have total confidence in him. He has a strong fundraising background. He is the person that was responsible for completely turning around the program in athletics in terms of major fundraising and the Razorback Foundation. He knows our top benefactors extraordinarily well, and I felt that I had to have somebody that could hit the ground running, could clean up some of the issues that we were facing that Brad and Joy left, and I think he's done that, and he's done it superbly. And it's rare that you can find somebody that can come in and hit the ground running, and on top of that knows all of our benefactors very, very well. I would even go as far as to say that he knows our benefactors better than Mr. Choate did in some respects. So we're looking for great things from Mr. Wyrick, and believe he will provide extraordinary leadership as we move forward.
Let me correct one thing. If you look on page 6 at the graph, you'll see the wheels didn't come off immediately in 2008. 2009, 2010 don't look bad. And so it took some time, and it's correlated with when they began to really hire people in 11 and 12.
That's a bad phrase, but my wheels come off references to the process that was in place that I assume, Chancellor, that you would have caught this with your processes before if you were still in that division. And as I understand what you're saying, 2008 is when that process came to an end.
I don't think there's any question that we would have caught it. And, you know, we had some very good people monitoring the budget on a regular basis. Clay and Sandy Edwards were a team that did that regularly. We met with Joy Sharp on a regular basis and went over the budget. We knew exactly what was in our what we had in our various foundation accounts. When I went to look to see what was in my chancellor's society account, that's money that is given from individuals to be used where the need is greatest, I was under the impression that I had $500,000 in there, but they did have spending authority over that account, and when I went to look, it was down to $140,000. So there was no monitoring of those accounts. I think, and this is somewhat speculation on my part, but I think Joy probably panicked. She did not know. She thought that maybe she'll dig out of it next semester or next year, and it had gotten so big that wasn't possible. And the auditors made statements in this report that Brad really had no idea about the budget. He didn't know what were in the funds. He didn't have any spreadsheets in his office. You know, I mean, it's all here in the audit by the legislature, legislative auditors.
Did that panic coincide with the Tyson money that was placed in the wrong account?
You know, the bottom line on that one is that Joy Sharp claims that it was a mistake. If you look at the documentation, she is the one who wrote the fund in. I could see personally that she could have made a mistake there, putting the right numbers down. I think other people could claim that do that on a regular basis, that's easy to do. She claims it was a complete mistake. One of the auditors in our what did we call it when we met with them? Exit interview suggested they thought that she made a mistake. Others have suggested that she might have done it knowingly and willingly. You know, I don't know what to say other than, you know, I guess it's her word against whoever doesn't believe her. I have known Joy for a long time. She took total and complete responsibility for this. She stepped forward and said to the media and said to the auditors and said to us that she wasn't watching the bottom line. So all I can say to you is that I don't know what benefit there would be, you know, by her doing it willingly and knowingly and trying to be fraudulent. And the auditors didn't, they flagged it, but they didn't suggest she was fraudulent. Anybody else? I want to thank everybody for coming today. I appreciate it. Mark Rushing is sitting over here, and Steve Voorhees. Steve, raise your hand. They all know you, I think. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and we're all available also to try to answer your questions, and I thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.